I never planned on bringing that tumor report home. It was just a filming prop I had stuffed in my backpack by mistake. But fate has its own cruel sense of timing. That evening, over dinner, Jessica suddenly looked at me, her voice calm yet distant. "How many months are left?" I froze for a moment. To me, it was obvious she was asking about our one-year marriage contract. So I answered casually, "Not long, probably 2 months." Jessica fell silent. Her expression didn't change, but the air between us shifted. Later, when I went abroad for a quiet 3-month study program, I thought little of that dinner. But when I came back, I heard whispers from friends. Jessica had turned the entire country upside down, searching for her supposedly dead husband. Alive, she swore she must see him. Dead, she demanded the body. That's when I realized Jessica and I had been speaking two very different languages that night. I had just ordered enough takeout to cover the whole table, chopsticks in hand, ready to dig in, when Jessica appeared out of nowhere and sat across from me. It had been months since I'd last seen her. Truthfully, in the year we'd been married, moments like this were rare. She kept her distance, always busy, always cold. Her assistant had once told me plainly, "It's just a contract marriage. 2 years, nothing more. Don't overthink it. When the time's up, take the money and walk away. A woman like Miss Lynn is far beyond your reach." And that was the truth. Jessica Lynn carried herself with a natural arrogance, the kind born from years of being admired, respected, untouchable. Meanwhile, I was just a man who'd clawed for a decade to barely touch the edge of her world. She was always out of my league. That's why I never asked about her personal life. Never stepped where I wasn't welcome. That night, she sat quietly across from me, still in her couture business suit, the weight of her empire clinging to her. When a drop of hot pot broth nearly splashed her sleeve, she paused for a brief second then, without warning, asked, "How many months are left?" I looked at her in confusion. Jessica had always treated time as money. Had she really come all this way just to ask about the expiration date of our marriage? Maybe she couldn't stand the thought of me any longer, eager for the day I disappeared. So, after calculating carefully, I answered, "About 2 months. Don't worry, Miss Lynn. When the time comes, I'll leave on my own. I won't trouble you." She went quiet again, her eyes unreadable. Then, after a long pause, she spoke, her voice carrying a faint emotion I couldn't quite place. "In this final stretch, do you have any wishes?" I shook my head. "No. I don't need anything." Maybe it was just my imagination, but in that moment, her lashes trembled ever so slightly. After that night, Jessica changed. She was suddenly around more often, watching me, hovering quietly like a shadow. Before, I'd be lucky to see her once every few weeks. Now, she was always home. One morning, while I was replying to messages from my agent, I noticed Jessica sitting silently in the living room, her gaze fixed on me. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced a smile. "Miss Lynn, aren't you going to the company these days?" She shook her head calmly. "The company's matters aren't important right now." Her words unsettled me. That same morning, my agent had told me that Domingo had returned to the country. I couldn't help but glance at the bottles of wine scattered on the living room table. I understood. Jessica's assistant had once revealed the real reason behind our contract marriage. My face resembled Jessica's childhood sweetheart by about 70%. Domingo, a rising star who had exploded in popularity 2 years ago, thanks to a web drama Jessica herself had invested heavily in. But once fame came knocking, Domingo cut ties with her and went abroad. I was nothing more than a placeholder, a cruel reminder of someone she had lost. I sighed quietly. Love among the wealthy was nothing like ours. People like me were just background characters in their games. After wrapping up my latest project, a melodramatic drama about a domineering CEO chasing love, I finally had a few days to rest at home. While cleaning, I remembered that tumor report prop I had taken by mistake. I turned my bag inside out but couldn't find it. Maybe Marco had seen it and thrown it away. I figured I'd explain it to the director later. Not wanting to disturb Jessica, who seemed lost in her own world, I stayed in my room, snacking and playing games. At one point, I laughed too hard, choked on water, and broke into a violent coughing fit. That's when I heard her voice outside the door, anxious, trembling in a way I had never heard before. Has it gotten worse again? Are you in pain? I couldn't answer through the coughing, and in the next moment, she burst into the room. For once, Jessica Lynn, the woman always composed, always in control, looked completely panicked. She fumbled for her phone, dialing her assistant. Don't worry. I'll have Laura take you to the hospital right away. Through watery eyes, I looked up at her in confusion. I finally caught my breath and said, "What's the use of going to the hospital? I just choked on water." But Jessica froze. Her expression shifted, her gaze fixed on me as if she were seeing something I couldn't. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "You're right, there's no point anymore. With only 2 months left, medicine can't do anything." Her words echoed in the room, heavy, chilling. And in that moment, I realized she hadn't been asking about the contract at all. Clearing my throat, I finally broke the heavy silence. "Miss Lynn, if there's nothing else, I'd like to rest alone in my room. Is that all right?" It was as if my words pulled her back from some distant thought. For the briefest moment, sorrow flickered in her usually noble, detached eyes, something I had never seen before. That night, she knocked on my door again. I couldn't help but feel helpless. In just one day, I had seen more of Jessica Lynn than in all the months of our marriage combined. The faint trace of alcohol lingered on her, stronger than before. Her flawless, carefully styled hair was now a little undone, falling in a messy tangle around her face. Her voice was quiet, almost uncertain. "Do you have time tonight? I'd like you to come with me to a dinner party. Some friends are gathering. We've been married this long, and none of them have even met you." I stared at her in surprise. Over a year into our marriage, I had always known my place. At best, I was a substitute, someone who didn't belong in her world. Why now? Why would she bring me into her circle of friends? And then a thought struck me. Domingo had returned. Could this be her way of humiliating me in front of him, showing me off as nothing more than a pale imitation? After a long pause, I asked carefully, "Will Mr. Domingo also be there tonight?" Her eyes flickered, confusion flashing for an instant before she gave a faint nod. That was all the answer I needed. Most of Jessica's friends were daughters of the elite, heiresses dressed in brands that cost more than I earned in a year. As we stepped into the room, I felt all their eyes turn to me, sharp and judgmental. Their gazes told me everything. I didn't belong here. Walking ahead, Jessica suddenly stopped, and I nearly bumped into her. Then I realized her hand had slipped into mine. For the first time since our marriage, she held me. Her palm was cold against mine, her face expressionless as always, but that single touch made me wonder. What was she really feeling beneath all that control? Before I could process it, a familiar voice rang out from behind. "Sorry, everyone. Just got off the plane, I'm late." Domingo. That face so similar to mine, yet sharpened by confidence, polished by wealth. The bespoke suit, the easy charm, it was enough to make my cheap clothes feel like shackles dragging me into the dirt. Standing next to him, I looked every bit the country bumpkin. I instantly let go of Jessica's hand, afraid he might think we were truly a couple. But she froze in place, the faintest bitter smile tugging at her lips. Her voice dropped to a whisper I almost didn't catch. "Do you still hate me that much?" My chest tightened, but I said nothing. Domingo walked in and was immediately surrounded by a flock of young women, their laughter and admiration following him as he took the center seat. Wealth was power, and in that moment, I felt just how far apart our worlds really were. I slipped into a corner seat, hoping to fade into the background. From across the room, Jessica's eyes found mine. She had hesitated when she saw I hadn't sat beside her. For a moment, her lips parted as if she wanted to say something. But then she lowered her gaze and let it go. Jessica Lynn, always the perfect hostess, always untouchable, was different tonight. Her expression stayed calm, but the gloom in her eyes was impossible to hide. With each slow sip of wine, she wrapped herself in a colder aura. I followed her gaze to Domingo. Most people wouldn't notice, but I had been watching closely. He went out of his way to avoid her, pretending not to see her as he greeted everyone else, deliberately brushing past as if she were invisible. So the rumors were true. Selena, one of Jessica's closest friends, leaned in when no one was watching, patting her shoulder gently. "You two still haven't cleared things up, have you?" Jessica pressed her fingers against her temple, a rare crack in her composure. Selena smirked, teasing, "Hesitating like this, that's not your style. Be careful, or someone else might swoop in and steal him away." Jessica's eyes lifted, sharp and warning. Selena quickly raised her hands in mock surrender. All right. Who would dare steal a man from you? I was only joking." Before Jessica could respond, Selena glanced around curiously. "By the way, where's that husband of yours? Haven't seen him all night." Jessica followed her gaze to my empty chair, her brows furrowing. At that very moment, I was hiding in the restroom. Not because I wanted to avoid her, but because the atmosphere outside was suffocating. And then I heard voices. Domingo's voice, low, careless, and far too familiar. "So, still on the outs with President Lin?" one of his friends asked. "Honestly, who would have thought she'd be this loyal to you? She even married a man who looks 70% like you, just to keep a shadow of you around." Domingo chuckled, adjusting his suit in front of the mirror. "I'll keep her hanging for a while longer. One day, when I'm in the mood, I'll crook my finger and she'll come running back. She always does. But you're right, I should be careful. If she ever wakes up from this long Cold War, where else would I find a woman this devoted? No one else would ever give me what she does." He paused, sneering. "That husband she married? Just a cheap knockoff of me." Inside the stall, my hand froze on the doorknob. My legs were numb from standing too long, but I couldn't bring myself to step out. If I opened the door, I'd be staring both of them in the face, awkward beyond words. So I stayed still, a silent bystander, listening to a man mock the woman who had changed everything about herself for him. Maybe I should have been angry. Maybe I should have felt humiliated. But all I thought about was this. If Jessica wanted me to keep her from losing face tonight, then she owed me an increase in my allowance. And just as I smirked bitterly at my own thoughts, a sudden knock echoed on the restroom door. Jessica's voice floated through the restroom door, calm, but edged with worry. "Hello? Excuse me, is anyone inside?" Bruno shot Domingo a look filled with envy, then muttered, "See? She disappears for a moment, and she's already searching for you. Worried sick." Domingo smirked, smugness written all over his face. "Told you. Who else could she possibly love, if not me?" But then Jessica's voice came again, more urgent this time. "Excuse me, has my husband been in there all this time? He hasn't come out. I'm worried something might have happened." The restroom went silent. Then, with a creak, the stall door swung open. I stepped out stiffly, locking eyes with Domingo. For a second, the world froze. Neither of us spoke. Then I forced an awkward laugh. "What a coincidence. You're here too." Domingo's face shifted, pale first, then dark with anger. Without a word, he brushed past me, storming out. As he passed Jessica, his glare was sharp enough to cut glass. Jessica moved forward, and I followed behind, frantically signaling her with my eyes. "He's mad. Chase after him. Don't just stand there, idiot." She frowned at my expression. "What's wrong? Is your illness getting worse?" I almost choked. Illness? I was young, healthy, alive. "Don't curse me like that." Trailing us, Selena's voice piped up, curious. "Illness? What illness?" That's when I noticed her, Jessica's childhood playmate, infamous for her string of boyfriends. Tonight, she'd arrived with a rather odd choice, a shy college student in jeans and a hoodie, so out of place among the designer suits and dresses. He'd been seated next to me earlier, and out of boredom, I'd even tricked him into drinking with me. Selena. Toxic girl. Always trouble. Jessica didn't explain. She only replied lightly, "You wouldn't understand." The words were meant for Selena, but honestly, I didn't understand either. Still, as Jessica's contract husband, I knew better than to ask about things that weren't mine to touch. When we returned to the private room, a crowd had already gathered around Domingo. Noticing Jessica, Bruno raised his voice deliberately. "Domingo, don't be sad. A woman like that isn't worth it." The room froze. Nobody dared to respond. No one wanted to offend Jessica Lynn. Bruno flushed at the silence, doubling down. "Even if you two are in a fight, does she have to hurt you so openly? She knows how much pride you have." Before he could finish, a timid voice cut in. "But isn't President Lynn's husband not you? Isn't it wrong to say that?" I turned my head, startled. It was Selena's shy boyfriend, clutching his glass nervously, actually standing up for me. Bruno's face twisted with annoyance, ready to snap back, but Selena cut him off sharply. "Her actual husband is right here. What are you even stirring things up for?" I blinked in shock, my gaze darting to Jessica. She wasn't looking at Selena. Her eyes were locked on Bruno and Domingo, cold, razor-sharp, and terrifying. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke. "Where's security? If they cause trouble again, throw them both out." Her voice sliced through the room. Even I was stunned. And for once, even Domingo looked up at her, disbelief hardening into a frigid stare. The dinner ended in awkward silence. When we got home, I closed the door behind me, only to nearly bump straight into Jessica. She stood there in the dark living room, motionless, the faint scent of wine clinging to her perfume. Normally, Jessica Lynn was disciplined, restrained, never overindulging. But tonight, she was different. So close I could hear her breathing, feel the tension radiating off her. My heart pounded. If I moved, it might give me away. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice low, tinged with something she was struggling to suppress. "I have something to tell you." The air thickened. I swallowed, suddenly nervous. "Go ahead. Actually, I also have something I need to tell you." But just as the moment sharpened between us, her phone rang. She hesitated, then answered. It was her assistant. Her brows furrowed instantly. "What did you say?" "A funding collapse." Without another word, she rushed toward the door. Just before leaving, she turned back to me, her eyes unreadable. "Very soon." And then she was gone. I stood there in silence, the weight of her unfinished words heavy in the air. I wanted to tell her about my own plans, to study abroad, to sharpen my craft. But seeing her leave in such urgency, I swallowed it back. On a friend's advice, I had decided to disappear for 3 months, to train quietly overseas. By the time I returned, our contract would be nearly up. She wouldn't have to see me while I was away. And when I came back, we could sign the divorce papers quietly, cleanly. I could finally throw myself fully into my career. Abroad, I lived simply, changed to a local sim, cut myself off from the noise, and focused on nothing but learning. 3 months passed like a blur. But the moment I landed back home and swapped to my old SIM card, my phone nearly exploded. 99 plus missed calls, endless unread messages. Only a handful of people had known about my trip. My roommate, my closest friend, and my family back in the countryside. My agent knew I had requested leave. The company had approved it. There shouldn't have been chaos. And then a push notification appeared on my screen. From a gossip account called Entertainment Circle Rumor Guide. Another tragic love story. Refusing to give up on her deceased husband, the famous Lynn Group CEO has searched the entire country, determined to see him one last time. Alive or dead. I read it again. And again. Lynn Group CEO. Jessica Lynn. But the words didn't make sense. Was I misunderstanding? Or had Jessica found herself another husband? Who was this so-called deceased husband they were talking about? Back at Jessica's villa, the silence was suffocating. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Even the half-finished glass of juice on the table was still there, 3 months later, untouched. I stared at it, wordless. By now, it should have fermented into something sour. My room was locked tight, the key nowhere in sight. Inside was my bank book, 10 years of hard-earned savings I couldn't even reach. I slumped onto the sofa, a heaviness pressing down on me. Empty wine bottles littered the floor. Clearly, the cleaning lady hadn't been around for months. With a sigh, I picked up a broom. If nothing else, I'd at least leave this place tidy one last time before the contract ended. That's when the villa door opened. Jessica walked in. It was only 2 in the afternoon, far too early for her. Normally, Jessica Lynn would still be buried in back-to-back meetings, polished and untouchable. But the woman who stood in front of me was nothing like that. No makeup. Casual clothes. Eyes red and swollen. Head hung low. Jessica Lynn, always immaculate, always in control, looked so undone that for a second, I wondered if her empire had crumbled overnight. She slipped off her jacket, lifted her head, and froze when she saw me sitting there. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she rubbed her eyes, exhaustion etched into every movement, and whispered, "Haven't slept in days. I must be hallucinating." I blinked. Hallucinating? Before I could answer, she stumbled forward, snatched a bottle of wine off the table, and drank straight from it. The bitter smell of alcohol clung to her breath as she came closer, her eyes glassy with emotion. Then, without warning, her hands cupped my face. And she kissed me. Her lips pressed hard against mine, her arms wrapping around my waist, clinging like she was terrified I'd disappear if she let go. Her perfume, so familiar, so hers, overwhelmed me. My heart thrashed in my chest. I tried to push her back, murmuring, "Jessica, I'm not dead." But she only tightened her grip, eyes bloodshot, voice hoarse with desperation. "Even if this is just a dream, let me have it. Let me dream a little longer." Dream my ass, I thought bitterly. God, I hated dealing with drunk people. Her embrace only grew wilder, like she was drowning, and I was the only thing keeping her afloat. Finally, too exhausted to fight, I let my arms fall still. And just when I did, Jessica's body went limp. She collapsed against me. Panic jolted through me. I checked her breathing. Thankfully, she wasn't gone, just unconscious from exhaustion and too much wine. But still, I sat there shaken, holding her in my arms, asking myself, what in the world happened to her? I called the cleaning lady, desperate for answers. She gasped when she heard my voice. You're alive? Jessica told me you were dead." "I'm perfectly fine," I said firmly. Did she get that from you?" Her voice tumbled over itself in a rush. "I'll explain everything. I'll come right away. Please just wait for me." But 8 o'clock came. No one showed. Jessica never woke. My room stayed locked. And I was left pacing, phone in hand, piecing the truth together. The cleaning lady had taken a photo of a tumor report and shown it to Jessica. A report that wasn't real at all. It was a prop I'd accidentally brought home from set. And suddenly, everything clicked. Jessica's strange questions. Her somber looks. That one night at dinner, when she asked me how much time I had left. She hadn't been talking about our marriage contract. She thought I was dying. And when I told her 3 months, she believed it. Literally. By some miracle, Jessica had only just started posting missing person notices. If I'd returned any later, I wouldn't have been coming back to a wife. I'd have been walking into my own memorial service. When she finally stirred awake, it was nearly midnight. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed and heavy. She rubbed her temples, then sat there, blank and lost. I forced a crooked smile. "Miss Lynn, you're finally awake." She nodded faintly, waiting. So I told her everything. "I'm not dead. I'm perfectly fine. I just went abroad for 3 months of training. I meant to explain before, but that night you rushed out for the company. That report you saw, it was a filming prop from a drama I worked on." Jessica froze, lashes trembling as she whispered, "A prop?" "Yes," I breathed. "I accidentally brought it home." The room fell into silence. Then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, she asked again, "So, you're really not dead?" "Of course not." Her lips parted, her eyes lifting to mine. But then her gaze flicked to my mouth. Her brow furrowed. Why are your lips swollen? What exactly were you doing abroad? My stomach dropped. God forbid she remembered. Don't you recall? You were drunk last night. Jessica froze. Then, in an instant, the unshakable CEO turned crimson. She coughed, covering her embarrassment with icy dignity. Forget it. Since that misunderstanding is cleared, let's talk business. The reason I came back today was to finalize the divorce. Our 2-year marriage contract has ended. Do you have time tomorrow? I opened my mouth, but she answered herself immediately.
No.
I don't. What about the day after? Or the day after that? I tried. No time, she said coldly. You know how busy I am with work. I fell silent. Truth was, I wasn't in any rush. I'd only hurried back because I thought Jessica was desperate to leave me. Wasn't Jessica supposed to be chasing after Domingo? That's what I'd always believed. But the more I thought about it, the stranger it all seemed. There was something different in the way she looked at me, something that felt too heavy, too real, for someone who was supposedly just keeping a stand-in around. Of course, I knew my role. From the very beginning, I was just Domingo's shadow. And yet, how could I deny it? Jessica's beauty was the kind that could break through anyone's defenses. In those early days, I'd felt it too. A spark. A tug at my chest every time she walked into the room. And living together for more than a year, well, even if you dislike someone, proximity breeds familiarity. For me, it was more than that. But I reminded myself, again and again, that Jessica and I were from 2 different worlds. Her heart had never been mine to claim. Falling for her would only make me pathetic, clinging to something I could never hold. So I crushed every sprout of feeling the moment it tried to grow. Maybe what she was showing me now was nothing more than habit. The residue of a year spent under the same roof. Or maybe she was confusing me for the man she truly longed for. Either way, I couldn't afford to believe it. So I smiled faintly and told her, "Then pick a time. Let's get the divorce over with. I won't trouble you anymore. I'll rent a place in the meantime." The next time I saw Domingo, he came to me. He sat there sipping tea, studying me with a smug calm before finally asking, "Do you know why Jessica married you?" I nodded, finishing the sentence for him. "Because I look like you. I was a substitute." For a split second, he froze. Then he sneered. "If you already know that, why are you still hanging around? You should understand. Once I apologize, she'll run back to me without hesitation." I stayed calm. "That's why we'll be divorced in a few days." His composure cracked. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. After a long pause, he let out a cold laugh. "Good. As long as you understand. Don't pester her again." But just as he turned to leave, the door opened. Jessica was standing there. I had no idea how much she'd overheard. Domingo's tone softened, almost pleading. "Jessica, it was my fault. I never should have gone abroad. Please come back to me." Her brows knit. She stepped aside with cool precision. "Mr. Domingo, please have some self-respect. Don't say things that cause misunderstandings." His pride stung. "What do you mean? I've already apologized. What more do you want?" Jessica's gaze didn't waver. "Shouldn't I be asking you that? You've been dragging me into rumors just to keep yourself relevant. I let it go, for your sake. But tell me, what exactly is it that you want from me?" The air thickened with scandal. Everyone watching could feel it. She continued, voice sharp as glass. "You've deliberately fed gossip, stirred whispers, and when it served you, you hid behind my name. And I was kind enough not to call you out. But now? Don't push your luck." Her eyes flicked toward me, catching me frozen mid-eavesdrop. "And you," she said pointedly. "Last time you left before I could finish what I had to say. Tonight, I'll make it clear." Her words dropped like a bombshell. The truth unraveled. Back when Domingo's drama collapsed after the investor pulled out, the director had pushed him to attend a dinner. They called it sponsorship. But in reality, it was the unspoken rules, trading dignity for money. By chance, Jessica had been there that night. And when she saw Domingo cornered by a wealthy woman twice his age, she stepped in. She saved him and then funded the entire production herself. Jessica, who never dirtied herself in scandal, suddenly found herself caught in whispers. Rumors twisted it into a love story that she'd secretly adored Domingo since childhood. With her family's power, everyone fawned over her, feeding the lie until even Domingo believed it. After all, why else would Jessica pour money into such a trashy web drama unless she loved him? Why else would she never deny the rumors? But now, Jessica's mask slipped. Her tone was ice. Do you know why I never held you accountable for what you did? Because you should be thanking that face of yours. Without it, you would have disappeared. Instead, you rode my name to fame. I stared, stunned. All this time, I thought I was the only substitute. But no, Jessica had been propping him up as one too. Jessica caught my expression, and to my surprise, a trace of amusement flickered in her eyes. She reached for my hand. Do you remember where we first met? She asked. Of course I remembered. The first time had been on a plane. She was fresh back from studying abroad, elegant and unreadable, her eyes buried in a financial newspaper.
Me?
I'd been reckless, bold. I told her I was an actor, an 18th-tier nobody with nothing to his name. She barely looked up, muttered a distracted. And then, pointing to the tallest skyscraper on the horizon, I said with a grin, "That's my father's company." Jessica's eyes finally flickered with surprise. She glanced at me, then pointed toward the towering glass giant beside the building I had proudly claimed as mine. "That one," she said softly, "is my father's company." I almost laughed. In my head, I mocked her. What a ridiculous lie. Who in this city didn't know the tallest building downtown belonged to the Lin Corporation? Was she really trying to pass herself off as the daughter of the chairman? But then, after we landed, reality hit me. She wasn't lying. She was the daughter of the Lin Corporation's chairman. When we walked out of the terminal, her driver was already waiting. I was still standing there, awkwardly searching for a ride, when she suddenly turned to me. "Why don't I give you a lift?" she asked. "I'm heading to see Alexia anyway." "You're Alexia's son, aren't you?" Flustered, I waved my hands.
No.
"I'm just an extra actor." Jessica's lips curved into a faint smile. That smile, paired with her flawless face, could have shattered any young man's logic. Mine certainly didn't survive. "Alexia once did my father a favor," she said lightly. "It's fine. I'll take you." And just like that, I caved. "Okay then, let's go." But when we neared my company, I stalled. I claimed I was hungry and coaxed her into sharing a bowl of wontons at a street stall. Later, I managed to lure her into a fried chicken shop. Clearly, she had never set foot in such places. Sitting there, she cut the chicken breast delicately with a knife and fork, posture perfect, movements graceful. I couldn't stop staring. When she finally looked up, she whispered with sincerity, "Thank you for bringing me to eat something this delicious." That moment stayed with me. Chapter 5, New Year's Wish. I smiled back at her.
See?
Good food makes everything better, especially fried chicken. Jessica chuckled softly, almost as if surprised at herself. "You're right, it really does lift my mood a little. So can we go see Alexia now?" I pretended to hesitate. "Wait, I'm not full yet. How about some afternoon tea first?" By the time we left the cafe, night had already fallen. I sighed dramatically. "Oh no, it's too late now. Let's see Alexia tomorrow. How about a movie instead?" She hesitated, but eventually nodded. What I didn't know at the time was the truth of what Jessica had been carrying when I first met her. That day on the plane, she was only 2 weeks removed from tragedy. Her parents and brother had died in a car accident while she was still abroad. She had fought with her father before leaving, refusing to take over the company, and because of that, she had missed their final call. Her family had been on their way to surprise her with tickets to Mexico. But fate cut the reunion short. The phone had rung and rung, but Jessica never answered. When she returned, she was drowning in grief. Her plan was simple, terrifying, final. Say goodbye to the few people she had left, then end her life. But that day, as she met me, A shameless boy who only noticed her because of her beauty. Someone too stubborn to leave her alone. I dragged her from food stall to fried chicken shop, later to skewers sizzling on the street. And somehow, this heiress, who had grown up surrounded by luxury, found herself savoring the smoke and grease of cheap meals. For one fleeting night, she laughed. She forgot her grief. She thought, maybe not now. Maybe there was still more to see, more to try, more to live for. And, because of that, she stayed. I didn't see Jessica again for a long time. I went back to filming, crying into cameras for roles that never took me anywhere. And then, one day, her name was everywhere. First, the headlines. The young heiress had claimed her father's shares and stepped into the CEO's chair at Lynn Corporation. Then, the scandals. Rumors of her and Domingo, whispers that wouldn't die. And then came the call, from Jessica herself. She wanted to sign a marriage contract with me. 2 years. $6 million upfront. $8 million later. I couldn't believe it. I even asked her assistant why. The assistant shrugged. She didn't know either, only that it wasn't because of Domingo, not really. The only reason she gave was simple. I resembled him. It stung a little, but I couldn't call it disappointment. After all, Jessica and I had only shared one strange day together. How could someone like her fall for someone like me? In the beginning, yes, I was attracted. How could I not be? She was exactly my type. But once we married, her coldness froze any foolish hopes I had. I reminded myself daily, this was a transaction, nothing more. Still, when Jessica finally admitted the truth to me, when the words left her lips, my heart stumbled. I laughed nervously, trying to cover it up. So, what you're saying is you fell in love with me at first sight? Jessica went quiet. And then, after a long pause, she denied it. I wasn't exactly disappointed, just a little hollow inside. Because when Jessica first signed that marriage contract with me, it wasn't about love at all. She only wanted to taste the things she'd never tried before her life ran out. And she chose me because I seemed interesting. Because she had never been in love. Her plan was simple. 2 years, then boredom. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. She couldn't explain why, but she began to care. And when she discovered that I only had 2 months left to live, the truth hit her. Some feelings don't announce themselves until loss looms close. They surface only when the tide recedes, revealing the bare rocks underneath. This wasn't habit. It wasn't mere companionship. It was love, the kind that only becomes undeniable when time is running out. I stared at her, speechless. Then why didn't you just say it earlier? Why all the drama? Wouldn't it have been easier to just tell me from the start? Jessica shifted uncomfortably, clearing her throat. Because
I thought you hated me.
you once said making you sign that contract was wrong, that it made you feel like I treated you as a commodity, like I didn't respect you. And you've always kept me at arm's length, acting like you couldn't wait to cut ties. Remember that dinner party? You wouldn't even sit beside me. Her words sank into me, quiet and heavy. I wondered if maybe my own bottom line had been too low. Back then, when I heard I'd get over 10 million just for signing that contract, all I felt was the thrill of revenge, never once thinking about respect. Finally, I forced a laugh. Tell Selena she's overthinking. And next time there's such a good deal, make sure you call me first. Jessica's eyes flared as she glared at me, but I couldn't help giving her an awkward grin. Meanwhile, Domingo, forgotten, standing off to the side, was frozen, his face twisted by despair. He muttered something bitter under his breath, called Jessica a heartless woman, then stormed out, slamming the door. I glanced at my luggage, still sitting downstairs. I had come here planning to pack up and leave. But after everything that had just happened, Jessica now stood in front of the door, not moving, waiting for my answer. So, are we still getting divorced? I asked. She tilted her head, amused. I hesitated, then added, but you still haven't paid me the remaining 8 million. If we don't divorce, I'll be at a bit of a loss. Jessica let out a laugh, half helpless, half exasperated. A loss? If we don't divorce, you can have as many 8 million as you want. I nodded. All right then. Her eyes widened. All right then? That's it? You sound like you're being forced. I gave her a faint smile. Because I am reluctant. After all, you once planned to give me a funeral. That night, over dinner, Jessica suddenly asked, "Do you know what day it is today?" I frowned, confused. She pointed at the calendar. That's when I realized I'd almost forgotten. The new year was around the corner. The housekeeper added gently, "Ever since the accident, the young lady has always spent New Year alone." So I reached across the table, took Jessica's hand, and promised, "From now on, I'll spend every New Year with you." At midnight, fireworks lit up the city. Explosions of color bloomed against the night sky, reflected in Jessica's eyes as she rested in my arms. Downstairs, Domingo sat in heartbreak. Elsewhere, millions of strangers bore their own silent burdens. Yet in that instant, we all looked up at the same sky. The fireworks painted the night in brilliance, as if time itself had pressed pause. For a fleeting heartbeat, life's fragility and beauty existed together. Mountains vast, rivers endless, and us, just sparks in the dark. I raised my glass, whispered my wish into the new year, and let the words settle like a prayer. First, the headlines. The young heiress had claimed her father's shares and stepped into the CEO's chair at Lynn Corporation. Then, the scandals. Rumors of her and Domingo, whispers that wouldn't die. And then came the call from Jessica herself. She wanted to sign a marriage contract with me. 2 years. $6 million up front. $8 million later. I couldn't believe it. I even asked her assistant why. The assistant shrugged. She didn't know either, only that it wasn't because of Domingo, not really. The only reason she gave was simple. I resembled him. It stung a little, but I couldn't call it disappointment. After all, Jessica and I had only shared one strange day together. How could someone like her fall for someone like me? In the beginning, yes, I was attracted.
How could I not be?
She was exactly my type. But once we married, her coldness froze any foolish hopes I had. I reminded myself daily, this was a transaction, nothing more. Still, when Jessica finally admitted the truth to me, when the words left her lips, my heart stumbled. I laughed nervously, trying to cover it up. "So, what you're saying is you fell in love with me at first sight?" Jessica went quiet. And then, after a long pause, she denied it. I wasn't exactly disappointed, just a little hollow inside. Because when Jessica first signed that marriage contract with me, it wasn't about love at all. She only wanted to taste the things she'd never tried before her life ran out. And she chose me because I seemed interesting, because she had never been in love. Her plan was simple. 2 years, then boredom. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. She couldn't explain why, but she began to care. And when she discovered that I only had 2 months left to live, the truth hit her. Some feelings don't announce themselves until loss looms close. They surface only when the tide recedes, revealing the bare rocks underneath. This wasn't habit. It was a mere companionship. It was love, the kind that only becomes undeniable when time is running out. I stared at her, speechless. Then why didn't you just say it earlier? Why all the drama? Wouldn't it have been easier to just tell me from the start? Jessica shifted uncomfortably, clearing her throat. Because I thought you hated me. You once said making you sign that contract was wrong, that it made you feel like I treated you as a commodity, like I didn't respect you. And you've always kept me at arm's length, acting like you couldn't wait to cut ties. Remember that dinner party? You wouldn't even sit beside me. Her words sank into me, quiet and heavy. I wondered if maybe my own bottom line had been too low. Back then, when I heard I'd get over 10 million just for signing that contract, all I felt was the thrill of revenge, never once thinking about respect. Finally, I forced a laugh. Tell Selena she's overthinking. And next time there's such a good deal, make sure you call me first. Jessica's eyes flared as she glared at me, but I couldn't help giving her an awkward grin. Meanwhile, Domingo, forgotten, standing off to the side, was frozen, his face twisted by despair. He muttered something bitter under his breath, called Jessica a heartless woman, then stormed out, slamming the door. I glanced at my luggage, still sitting downstairs. I had come here planning to pack up and leave. But after everything that had just happened, Jessica now stood in front of the door, not moving, waiting for my answer. "So, are we still getting divorced?" I asked. She tilted her head, amused. I hesitated, then added, "But you still haven't paid me the remaining $8 million. If we don't divorce, I'll be at a bit of a loss." Jessica let out a laugh, half helpless, half exasperated. "A loss? If we don't divorce, you can have as many $8 million as you want." I nodded. "All right then." Her eyes widened. "All right then? That's it? You sound like you're being forced." I gave her a faint smile. "Because I am reluctant. After all, you once planned to give me a funeral." That night, over dinner, Jessica suddenly asked, "Do you know what day it is today?" I frowned, confused. She pointed at the calendar. That's when I realized I'd almost forgotten. The new year was around the corner. The housekeeper added gently, "Ever since the accident, the young lady has always spent New Year alone." So I reached across the table, took Jessica's hand, and promised, "From now on, I'll spend every New Year with you." At midnight, fireworks lit up the city. Explosions of color bloomed against the night sky, reflected in Jessica's eyes as she rested in my arms. Downstairs, Domingo sat in heartbreak. Elsewhere, millions of strangers bore their own silent burdens. Yet in that instant, we all looked up at the same sky. The fireworks painted the night in brilliance, as if time itself had pressed pause. For a fleeting heartbeat, life's fragility and beauty existed together. Mountains vast, rivers endless, and us, just sparks in the dark. I raised my glass, whispered my wish into the new year, and let the words settle like a prayer. "You worked hard this year too. Good night, see you next year."